Welcome to our special Dolby Institute and Soundworks Collection podcast. This is our special Road to the Oscars edition of the podcast, and we're sitting down and talking with the nominees for the films that have been nominated for Best Sound Editing. And I'm really thrilled to be sitting down with my old friend Alan Murray. Alan and I have we met, I guess, when you brought Space Cowboys up to Skywalker Ranch to mix. So Alan is. I'll embarrass him a little bit here by saying this is Alan's eighth nomination, his eighth trip to the show.
Yes,
and he's already won twice.
Yes,
once for Letters from Iwo Jima, and then again, 2 years ago?
Last year,
for American Sniper. Yeah. So, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Nominated this year for Sicario.
Yes, one of my favorite movies. So yeah,
it's a great movie. I watched it again because I knew we were going to be sitting down and talking, and it's actually better the second time.
Yeah,
I felt.
Yeah, and what a team too. That's Deakins and the director Denis, and yeah, it was an honor to work on that movie with him.
Well, of course, I want to talk with you about your long history with Mr. Eastwood, but let's talk about Denis for a minute. How did you get involved with this movie, and how did it get on your plate?
I first started with Denis on what was the movie before?
Was it Prisoners?
Yes, yeah. And we had met through the film editor, and Denis took a chance, and we got along great, and he loved the way we expanded the movie with the soundtrack, and then met up with him on Sicario, and went to it, and everybody was really happy. On the mix stage at the end, it's one of those movies where everything clicks. Mm-hmm. The editing, everything. It just clicked, and everybody was so happy when we left the mixing stage. So,
where did you guys mix it?
At Warner Brothers on stage 12 with John Reitz and Tom Ozanich, who also was my sound designer. So,
yeah, it was a great team.
Yes.
And just a great sounding mix. What were some, for you as the sound supervisor on this particular one, what were some of the challenges that you faced with this particular show?
Well, I think part of it was to keep the tension going. We used a lot of subtle low-end sound design ambiances to ratchet up the tension. And also on this movie, each character's gunshot had to have a different personality. Where Benicio's character was, even though he had a silencer pistol, it had to be visceral and scare the crap out of you the first time you hear it. And it was just his rage being released. So we had discussions about keeping it as a silencer, but the first time we played all the elements, everybody went, whoa. And then as we progressed through the end scene where he's going through the mansion and taking everybody out, everybody thought, well, they're going to hear this gunshot and everybody's going to come to the rescue. But at that time, we had established this powerful silencer shot, so we just kept it going. It kept building and building and building rather than diminishing. And the producer at one point was worried, well, everybody in the next room would hear it. Mm-hmm. But we were with his character at that point, so it really didn't matter. So it was just his rage unfolding in front of us.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. I really like what you just said about his character and being kind of, it's almost like a little bit of a subjective experience, like you're experiencing it through his ears, the way he is. One of the things that I noticed looking at the movie again was, it's and I don't say this to minimize it, but it's a very minimal track. It's,
yes.
There are times, especially I'm thinking about that great sequence in the SUV caravan when they go down into Juarez and they come back, where it seems like a lot of the ambiances and the effects kind of died down, and you almost go into the characters' heads for a second, and then so I'm curious about how those sequences came together, was that something that you talked with Denis about in the spotting, or did those moments kind of come together on the mixing stage, or how did those decisions get made? Because it was really just it was beautiful work.
Yeah, I think it was half and half. I think with Denis, he likes to take the audience to a safe place. So when you're in the convoy, you're kind of safe. Mm-hmm. And then he introduces sounds that say something's going to happen or something's not right here. In the convoy scene, it was a lot of radio messages and the helicopter all of a sudden appearing and all that. So he gets the audience questioning what's going on, and then there's this moment of resolve and everything quiets down, and then he hits you over the head with the crescendo of the scene. So he did that a lot throughout the movie. So, you know, like with Emily's character, everything kind of folded in, and we were in quiet areas with her because she was more isolated. Mm-hmm. So he played each scene. He was very involved in the way each scene sounded and the way it unfolded. So
yeah, I was thinking really specifically in that scene. You talk about Emily Blunt's character. There's a great little moment when they're driving down the street, and then she sees the bodies that are hanging from the overpass, and then basically everything except just a little bit of ambience falls away, and you're really having that moment with her. And you just touched on it, but I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit about. I just found myself watching the movie thinking like, it's so tense, but there's not a lot happening. It's just there's something about the pacing, and the way the sound work unfolds that just really I felt like I wanted to chew my fingernails off when I was watching the movie because it was so tense. So how did you guys achieve that kind of effect?
Again, it was a lot of subliminal low-end atmospheres that creep in and out, so you kind of know they're there, but you're not hit over the head with them. And then, like I said, as the scene unfolds, Denis brings in another sound, like, say it's a dog barking, and all of a sudden you're going, okay, what's going on here? You know, he upsets the natural scene, and there's a little chaos, and you're going, why is the dog barking? What's going on? And he makes everything kind of uneasy, and then he builds and builds and builds. So, and I also thought the incredible score by Johansen. I think the way the sound design and the effects went in and out of the score, where you didn't know what you were hearing, whether it was score or sound design, and it was all that blending of sounds that I think helped ratchet up the tension. So. Yeah.
The score is amazing.
Yes.
And Johann is also nominated for an Oscar for his work on the film, which I think is incredibly deserved.
Yes.
But I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about what you just said. I love that kind of territory, that kind of middle ground between sound design and music. Uh-huh. You know, when you've got tonal elements in your sound design, you don't really know where, So were those conversations that you and Johann had as the picture was going along, or did you kind of work on that on your own and bring that to the stage? How did that? Because it feels like a really beautiful blending.
Yeah. Well, we noticed on Prisoners how well our design and Johann's score blended then.
You guys had all worked together on the previous.
Yeah. And we hadn't met Johann, and Johann came at the end of the mix on Sicario, so we had finally met him. But he's just a great different dynamic type of score that you usually don't hear. So I think that also ratchets up the tension too.
I want to talk about your long history working with Mr. Eastwood. So you started off as an effects editor working with Bronco Billy was the first one that I saw on there. From 1980.
Yeah, well, actually the first one was I had just started sound editing at Paramount, and I heard that Mr. Eastwood was coming to do a movie, Escape from Alcatraz. So I found out who the film editors were, and I started stalking them in the commissary. And one day I went up and introduced myself to this wonderful film editor. His name was Ferris Webster. And I said, Ferris, I'm a young guy. I love Eastwood's movies, and I would do anything to work on them. And he said, well, what have you done? And I said, well, I've done this, this, and this, but I will work 120%. I will do anything in the world. So he said, well, we'll see. And we kept running into each other and we became friends. And then finally, he had the director at the time, Don Siegel, up in his room. So he said, well, why don't you come up and say hi to the director, and we'll see how it goes. So I went up and met Don Siegel. And Don was like, oh, yeah, I love giving shots to young talent and all that. So he
Don
said,
Siegel, who had done the Dirty Harry movies.
yes,
right?
yeah. So Don said, I'll tell you what, we're going to do a temp mix. We'll try out and see how it goes. And so I worked with a temp mix with Don, never meeting Eastwood yet. And then we were playing the temp mix back in the theater, and we were sitting there and the lights went down, and I felt people come in behind me and kind of push my seat forward, and I thought, there's a bunch of people behind me. Do I turn around? And I said, no, don't. So at the end of the thing, this hand came over and slapped me on the shoulder and said, oh, that's a really great job. And I turned around and it was Clint Eastwood, and I about jumped out of my chair. And I said, well, thank you. And he said, we'd like you to continue on with the final, and we thought you did a really great job. And so that's how it all met, and how we all met. And I don't know, what is it, 40 years later, we're still going strong. So.
That's amazing. And you're about to do the new one, Sully, with him, right?
Yes, about ready to start Sully, and another Murray has been adopted by Clint Eastwood, and that's my son, and he's now the film editor. So.
Your son's cutting picture for him, right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
That's great.
So he's, my kids grew up with his kids, Kyle and Allison, and they all became friends. And so it's been a extraordinary set of circumstances and probably the most incredible relationship. And look forward to seeing Clint every year with a new movie. So
it's amazing that he's and
yeah.
I feel like he's doing some of the best work of his career at this
yes,
point.
yeah.
What's the spotting process like with Clint? Do you guys really do a traditional spotting with him, or at this point you guys have worked together for on so many pictures?
Yeah, well, we started off doing spotting sessions, and finally after maybe the fourth or fifth picture, Clint said, you know what you're doing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to do. And I think he embraces what you bring to the table. And I think he works that way with everybody on his team, that I'm hiring you for your expertise. And, I'll give you a few guidelines on what I'm looking for. But other than that, go to town and surprise me, and let's see what we come up with. So he's very open to you doing broad strokes on the canvas and taking it where you want it to go, and then you play the reel back for him, and he'll sit there and take it all in, and you may make a few tweaks, but he's generally happy, so can't beat that.
Yeah. So how's that process of working with Clint different than, say, Denis or some of the other, because you've worked with a lot of big directors over the years. I was just looking at the list. I mean, you've worked with Martin Campbell, Alan Parker, Richard Donner. I mean, these are serious directors. Yeah,
well, I think it's something that they recognize in your persona or something, where you just hit it off. I mean, Richard Donner was, and I still see Richard. I saw Richard a year ago, and when we saw each other, I was sitting out in front of the commissary, and he came up, and we both started crying. It was. He's, all these people become your family, and Richard has always been the greatest guy. And, he was always the first one to invite you to the set and have you come eat with him in his trailer and all that. I mean, he's just been, all these people have been just wonderful. Martin Campbell, another one, and I don't know. We have these strong bonds, and I think they know that you're giving them 100%, and they appreciate it.
So what's the process like of working with Denis? Do you have a conversation now that you've done 2 movies with him? Do you talk with him before he goes off and shoots, or at what point do you kind of engage with him about the film?
Well, with Denis, since he lives in Montreal, it's a long distance relationship. So usually with Denis, he and his film editor, they set a blueprint, and basically what you look at the blueprint they've set and then you expand on it. So I think with Denis' movie, especially Sicario, it was pretty well structured by the time it got to me, and you can instantly see what the film editor's trying to do and where they're trying to go with their pacing and all that. So yeah, I think it's just with him, it's follow the blueprint that they've laid out, expand on it, try and take it to another area, but stay within the blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And do the picture editor do a fair amount of, because sometimes they do a lot of their own kind of sound work just to get their cut ready.
Yeah.
Was that the case with this picture?
Yeah, we had a film editor, Joe Walker, on this one, and yeah, he used to be a sound editor before he came into film editing.
That could be good or bad.
Yes. So I think as long as you recognize what Joe's trying to say, and he's the first one to say, I'm sure you have better stuff, but he takes a lot of time on his first cut getting the sound in there and where he wants to go. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice because with some directors, it's like, here's a big blank screen. Right. And with this, it was like, okay, I have a way to follow and I can see where they're going and I don't have to second guess. And
Denis had very specific ideas.
Yes, and Denis had specific ideas too. So, with Denis, we did a lot of sound design and found that certain things he would like, and yet certain things he'd take out. So it was every time we had like a sound design sequence come up, he'd say, okay, let's break it down and take out this one, keep that one. So it's such a in your mind critique of what these sounds are. No, what we ended up doing is we would do the temp mix and send the elements up to Montreal, and then they would go through it a lot more and then come back with responses to what we had done. So it was a back and forth.
Mm-hmm. So that's great because, sometimes if you don't get that opportunity, you just show up at the director shows up at the final mix and it's, they haven't heard stuff. It can be
right.
Some rude surprises.
Yes. Well, it's so subjective. Like some of the sound design elements to me said tension or power or something, and yet to him it said horror movie or so. It's interesting to see how different people interpret a certain sound and how that resonates with something in their past. So, and you can't try and figure it out. You just got to go with it. Yeah.
So would he talk with you about sort of emotionally what he was going for, or how did he direct you?
Well, because it's long distance, we didn't really get together, and especially on Sicario, until the final mix. So we'd go through each scene and discuss, and he would be very detailed on what he wanted to either increase in volume or take out or something. So he's very in the moment. And I think most of the movie came together on the mixing stage. Even though it was structured by the time we got it, it was still open to let's do this, let's do that, and see how it works out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think you definitely get the award for the creepiest ambiences.
Thank you. Yeah.
It was a very, very tense film. All right. Well, Alan, congratulations and good luck.
It was nice seeing you again.
I
appreciate doing this for Dolby because I think Dolby Atmos has lifted us into a whole new world, and it's nice to get sound reborn again. And it's very exciting. So
it is. Yeah, it's an exciting time. I think that directors are kind of more experimental and pushing things a little bit harder these days, and it gives a lot of fun for folks like you to be able to play.
Yeah.
So good luck on Oscar night.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming and talking to us.
All right. Good to see y'all.